2022. The U.S. Federal Reserve is raising interest rates at the fastest pace in 40 years. The national debt exceeds $30 trillion. Inflation hits 9%. Politicians warn the dollar is finished. Economists predict its collapse. Bitcoin advocates declare it dead. And then, something impossible happens. The U.S. dollar index surges to a 20-year high, not slowly, violently. The euro crashes. The British pound hits all-time lows against the dollar. The Japanese yen collapses. Emerging market currencies implode. Argentina, Turkey, South Africa, financial chaos spreads across the globe. But in America, stock markets hold. Capital floods in. The dollar gets stronger, not despite the chaos, because of it. One man predicted this exact scenario years earlier. His name is Brent Johnson, and his theory, the Dollar Milkshake Theory, explains something terrifying. Before the dollar dies, it will destroy every other currency first. It will suck the liquidity out of the global financial system like a straw draining a milkshake. And there's nothing anyone can do to stop it. This is the story of the Dollar Milkshake Theory, how it works, why it's happening right now, and what comes after the milkshake runs dry. Let me take you back to 2018. Brent Johnson, CEO of Santiago Capital, is sitting in front of a camera about to record an interview for Real Vision. He's about to introduce an idea that will make him famous and make a lot of people very angry. The Dollar Milkshake Theory describes a dynamic where capital flows from weaker economies into the US dollar, creating a feedback loop that amplifies dollar strength at the expense of virtually everything else. Here's how it works. Imagine the global financial system as a giant milkshake. Inside that milkshake, you've got all the world's currencies, assets, and liquidity mixed together. For decades, central banks have been pumping liquidity into this milkshake. Quantitative easing, stimulus programs, money printing. The milkshake has gotten bigger and bigger. But here's the critical part. The US dollar is the straw, and America has swapped out a syringe for the straw. The combination of higher relative interest rates, the deepest capital markets, tax policy, regulatory policy, the US dollar payment system, and the US military means the dollar is sucking liquidity out of the global system. When the Federal Reserve raises interest rates while other central banks print money, capital doesn't stay distributed evenly. It flows to where it gets the best return and the most safety. That's the United States. The world is currently awash in dollar-denominated corporate and sovereign debt. In a sovereign debt crisis, demand for dollars will rise dramatically as countries scramble to repay their loans. Think about it. If you're a country that borrowed billions in US dollars, you need dollars to pay it back. Not euros, not yen, dollars. And when interest rates rise, that debt becomes more expensive to service. You need even more dollars. So what do? You sell your own currency to buy dollars. Your currency weakens, the dollar strengthens, and the cycle accelerates. This is the milkshake effect in action. Capital pours in, and the dollar has continued to defy expectations. But Johnson's theory goes further. He's not a dollar permabull who thinks the dollar lasts forever. The Dollar Milkshake Theory essentially predicts that all fiat currencies, including the US dollar, will fail and be replaced by a new currency regime. But the numerous vast advantages that the US holds will ensure that the dollar will fare better through the collapse than other currencies. The dollar doesn't die first, it dies last, after it's drained everyone else dry. So why does the US get to be the straw? Why not the euro, or the yuan, or some other currency? The answer comes down to structural advantages that no other country possesses. Advantage number one. The reserve currency. The dollar's role as a reserve currency means that it is held in large quantities by foreign governments, central banks, and international institutions. Roughly 60% of global foreign exchange reserves are held in dollars. When crisis hits, everyone needs dollars because everyone is already using dollars. Advantage number 2, the deepest capital markets. America has the most liquid, deepest, and most transparent capital markets in the world. If you're a billionaire in Turkey or a sovereign wealth fund in the Middle East and your currency is collapsing, where do you put your money? U.S. Treasuries, U.S. stocks, U.S. real estate. There's simply no comparable alternative at scale. Advantage number 3, the petrodollar system. Oil, the world's most critical commodity, is priced and traded in dollars. If you're Japan and you need to import oil, you first need to convert yen to dollars. This creates permanent structural demand for dollars that doesn't exist for any other currency. Advantage number 4, military and legal hegemony. The U.S. Navy protects global trade routes. The U.S. legal system enforces contracts internationally. SWIFT, the global payment messaging system, is dollar-denominated and U.S.-controlled. If you get kicked out of SWIFT, you're cut off from the global financial system. Russia learned this in 2022. Advantage number 5, network effects. Once a system is entrenched, it's nearly impossible to replace. Why does everyone use the dollar? Because everyone else uses the dollar. Merchants accept it, banks clear it, contracts are written in it. Switching would require global coordination that simply doesn't exist, especially in a crisis when cooperation breaks down. Johnson emphasizes that the U.S., while not in perfect shape, still has more tools and weapons to maintain its position at the top of the global financial pyramid compared to other nations. These advantages aren't about the dollar being good. They're about the dollar being the least bad option in a system where all fiat currencies are flawed. Theory is one thing, reality is another. So let's look at what's actually happened since Johnson proposed this in 2018. 2020, the COVID crash. March 2020, global lockdowns hit. Markets panic. What happens? The initial global shock saw a rush into the US dollar as a safe haven. Although the Fed slashed rates and implemented QE, the dollar's dominance remained intact. Even as the Fed printed trillions, the dollar surged because everyone else needed dollars even more desperately. 2022, the rate hike cycle. The Federal Reserve begins raising rates aggressively. Conventional wisdom says this should crash the dollar because it makes U.S. debt more expensive. The opposite happens. Over the past 5 years, the U.S. dollar index, DXY, has strengthened considerably, defying predictions of its demise. The milkshake, it would seem, is very much in effect. The British pound crashes to $1.03, its lowest level since 1985. The euro falls below parity with the dollar for the first time in 20 years. The Japanese yen collapses from 105 to 150 yen per dollar, a 30% loss. Emerging markets in crisis. Countries with high levels of dollar-denominated debt are particularly vulnerable. Nations like Argentina, Turkey, and South Africa have already felt the sting, and more could follow if dollar appreciation continues. Sri Lanka defaults on its debt. Pakistan nearly collapses. Argentina's peso becomes worthless. Egypt devalues repeatedly. These aren't coincidences. They're the milkshake theory playing out in real time. The capital flow reality. For the U.S., despite its own economic challenges, capital pours in, asset prices remain resilient, and the dollar continues to defy expectations. Meanwhile, foreign investors pull capital out of their home countries and park it in U.S. assets. Johnson has been vindicated. The theory he proposed in 2018, widely mocked at the time, has played out almost exactly as he predicted. Not everyone agrees with the dollar milkshake theory. In fact, some very smart people think it's completely wrong. Ray Dalio, the founder of Bridgewater Associates, the world's largest hedge fund, has argued for years that the U.S. is a waning world power, and the dollar's days as the world's reserve currency are numbered. His argument, The U.S. has flooded the world with dollars through endless money printing. The national debt is unsustainable. America's political system is broken. China is rising. The dollar is living on borrowed time. Other critics point to the BRICS alternative. Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa are trying to create a dollar alternative for trade. The petro-yuan. China is making deals to buy oil in yuan, not dollars. De-dollarization. Central banks have been buying gold at record rates and reducing dollar reserves. So who's right, Dalio or Johnson? Johnson actually disagrees with Dalio on the endpoint. Johnson acknowledges that all fiat currencies, including the US dollar, will fail and be replaced by a new currency regime, but the difference is the path. Johnson says, "I'm not saying that the gold and silver people won't be right. I actually think that they will be
right. I think it's the journey along the way that I have the biggest problem with, as opposed to the end game. In other words, yes, the dollar will eventually die, but it's going to get much stronger before it gets weaker, and that strength will destroy other currencies first. Think of it like a black hole. As it consumes everything around it, its gravitational pull becomes stronger. Only after everything else has been consumed does the black hole itself collapse. So what happens next? How does the milkshake theory actually end? Johnson maintains that his view on the dollar has not changed significantly. He emphasizes that the current global landscape is set for a potential sovereign debt crisis if cooperation breaks down. Here's the sequence Johnson predicts. Phase 1, dollar strength, we are here. Capital flows into the U.S. The dollar strengthens. Foreign currencies and assets weaken. Debt crises spread globally. This phase can last years. Phase 2, the sovereign debt crisis. Eventually, countries cannot service their dollar-denominated debt. Defaults cascade. The global financial system seizes up. Cooperation between nations breaks down, which makes coordinated economic responses more challenging. Phase 3, the liquidity crisis. The world discovers there aren't enough dollars to meet demand. Banks fail, credit markets freeze. The Fed is forced to choose, let the global system collapse or print even more dollars to prevent it. Phase 4, the Great Reset. Eventually, the Fed prints so many dollars trying to save the system that the dollar itself loses credibility. All fiat currencies fail and are replaced by a new currency regime. Gold, silver, Bitcoin, or some combination becomes the new foundation. But here's the critical insight. That reset could be 5, 10, or even 20 years away. In the meantime, the dollar gets stronger, not weaker. What this means for you. If Johnson is right, here's what matters. For the near term, a strong dollar is deflationary for Americans. Imports get cheaper, travel abroad gets cheaper, foreign stocks and real estate get cheaper. If you hold dollars, you have increasing purchasing power globally. For foreign investors, a strong dollar is devastating. Your currency weakens, your debt burden increases, capital flees your country, asset prices collapse. For hard assets, gold and Bitcoin may initially struggle as the dollar strengthens, but their status as safe haven assets during periods of global instability may eventually drive their value up. They become the ultimate hedge for the endgame, but they might underperform in the meantime. For timing, this is the hardest part. Johnson acknowledges that his expected timing for the dollar endgame was initially too aggressive, but maintains that the framework has largely been accurate in predicting currency, capital, and market movements. The milkshake could take years to drain completely. Betting on the collapse too early can be just as costly as ignoring it entirely. Here's what makes the dollar milkshake theory so disturbing. If it's correct, there's no good outcome for anyone. The dollar strengthens, foreign countries suffer, defaults spread, a global crisis hits, the Fed prints, the dollar eventually dies anyway. It's not a question of if the system breaks down. It's a question of who gets destroyed first. Johnson himself said, it's the dollar's strength which brings the system down. The dollar's strength is the mechanism of its own destruction. Think about that. The very thing that makes the dollar appear invincible, its ability to drain liquidity from the rest of the world, is what guarantees its eventual collapse. But in the meantime, that strength destroys currencies, nations, and economies on a scale not seen since the 1930s. Johnson argues that the global financial system is trapped. Countries are burdened with debt, rely on dollar liquidity, and cannot easily shift away from the dollar-based system. We're not just watching market movements, we're watching the slow-motion unraveling of the post-World War II financial order. And nobody, not the Fed, not other central banks, not governments, has a plan to stop it. In 2018, Brent Johnson introduced the Dollar Milkshake Theory. Most people dismissed it. The dollar was supposed to collapse. Emerging markets were supposed to thrive. Alternatives like the yuan or euro were supposed to challenge dollar dominance. None of that happened. Instead, exactly what Johnson predicted came true. The dollar strengthened, other currencies collapsed, capital flowed into America, and the milkshake kept draining. The theory isn't about the dollar being good. It's about the dollar being last. Every other currency dies first. Then, only then, does the dollar die. The milkshake is running dry. The question isn't whether it ends. The question is who survives long enough to see what comes next. If this explanation of the dollar milkshake theory changed how you think about the global financial system, here's what I need. First, subscribe. We break down complex financial theories and what they mean for your money every single week. Second, comment below. Do you think Johnson is right? Is the dollar headed for a massive rally before its eventual collapse? Or are the critics correct that de-dollarization is already underway? Third, share this with someone who's been predicting the dollar's imminent collapse. They need to understand the milkshake theory before it drains them dry. Because understanding how the end game unfolds isn't just academic. It's the difference between positioning correctly and getting crushed in the process. I'll see you in the next one.